All right, so my name is Brian Snyder. I'm a Development Services Administrator for Hamilton County Planning and Development. This is a Zoom meeting to discuss a potential development on Snyder Road in Symmes Township. The way the meeting will go is I will describe the zone change process. Mr. Hildebrandt, the owner and developer of the potential project, will describe the project. And then one at a time, we will add the attendees. If you raise your hand and have something to say, we'll add you as a panelist so that you can have your comments on video. And then when your comments are over, we'll put you back into the attendees and add the next person who wants to speak. We schedule this to go for 1 hour if we take an hour. So I'll go right into it. The meeting that we're having tonight is a public/staff review conference. This is the required first step in the zone change process. There has been no formal application made for a zone change at this point. You're not allowed to apply for a zone change in Symmes Township until after you've had this informational meeting with the neighbors. We notified everybody within 200 feet of the development property. And we've had several of these before. I know I recognize some of these names as having attended these meetings before. So this may be a little bit redundant, and I'll probably go through it a little bit faster than I have in the past. The zone change process requires 3 meetings after this one. There's a regional planning commission meeting, a Hamilton County regional planning commission meeting. The planning commission will review the adopted land use plan for Symmes Township and make a recommendation. It is not a notified public hearing. Nobody gets notices for that meeting. It is a public meeting, but it's not a notified public hearing. The reason for that is that they're just looking at the land use plan and deciding whether or not the development is consistent with that plan. The next meeting would be the Symmes Township Zoning Commission. That meeting is always on the 3rd Wednesday of the month in the evening. That is a notified public hearing, so everybody that got notice for tonight's meeting would also get notice of that meeting. The Symmes Township Zoning Commission will make a recommendation to the Symmes Township trustees, who will also hold a future public hearing, and that would be a notified public hearing as well. Again, if you got notice for tonight's meeting, you get notice for that meeting. And the Symmes Township trustees have the final decision on whether to approve or deny the zone change. Following that, their decision is appealable, as all their decisions are, and there's a 30-day referendum period where the question of the zone change could be put on the ballot if you get enough signatures. That's also the same for everything that the Symmes Township trustees do by resolution. So that's the zone change process. This property is zoned single-family residence. It's zoned A, single-family residence. The proposal would be for a planned multiple residence district. The planned multiple residence district, the DD district that would be requested, would be accompanied by a specific site plan. And if that plan were approved by the Symmes Township trustees, there would be another meeting of the zoning commission to go over the details of that plan. But once that plan is approved, that's all that can be built on the property. You can't have that plan approved and then completely change the other plan behind everybody's back and build something different. Any changes to that plan would be subject to future public hearings, and everybody would be notified before that could happen. That's the zone change process. Very briefly, as I said, I will let Mr. Hildebrandt go through the actual development proposal, and then we'll start taking comments.
Thanks, Brian. Is there a way that I can share my screen or a site plan with everybody just to kind of talk through the site plan? Or
yeah, you should have the option at the bottom.
Share screen, yeah.
Oh, just hit share screen?
Yep.
Share. Okay. Can you guys see that? Are you able to see that?
Yep, it's on the screen.
Okay. So thanks, Brian, for the introduction. This is it's been modified a little bit. This is the most recent site plan that we have. We have been working in conjunction with 5 Seasons, that is the property owner to the north. So this is our property line. Approximately right through here is where our property line is at. So the current entrance into 5 Seasons comes through here and winds back. Sorry, it comes through here and winds back down into this road and ties into this location. So what we are proposing to do is actually cut and fill the entire valley that is through here and make it level. So there's about a 30-foot drop of elevation between this location here down to the stream, and then a 30-foot rise back up to this location. So we're proposing to terminate the entrance drive of Five Seasons and move it down south and have a joint boulevard that comes in here that goes straight into the front door of Five Seasons. In conjunction with doing this, they would like to add 3 tennis courts and a sand volleyball court with a gazebo that's out front here. Off of that, we would have a large amenity space. This would be a green area, green space pocket park. We would have another pocket park here. And then this is where our proposed 4-story apartment building would be. So if you can follow down through here, we would have surface parking here. And then as you get to this location, the grade would go down and you could enter underneath the building. So this would be 1 story of single underground parking under the 4-story office building that's fully enclosed underground. And and over on this side, on the west side, we would also have some additional parking here right along Schneider Road. So that is our site plan, and this is a rendition of what our current proposal will look like. So this is the elevation from 71 here on the top. Hopefully everybody can still see that. So this is a rendition of what the building would look like from the 71 perspective. Again, this is the second elevation of what it would look like from the 71 elevation from Five Seasons. So if you're the property owner, property to the north, looking at our apartment building, this is the elevation that you would see. And then from actual Schneider Road, the Schneider Road, if you're on Schneider Road looking at the building, the way we have designed it is that to try to eliminate the length of it for perspective, we've actually angled the building back towards Schneider Road so that it helps block some of the mass of the building down. And this is the opposite view here. So, as you come around the corner here, try to get the underground parking. So that is our proposed plan, and happy to take any questions that you might have.
Okay, so if anybody would like to speak, I think there's a button that allows you to raise your hand. You may need to unshare your screen, Chris. So
Okay.
see all the options better. I think it stops there at the bottom. Yeah, they're at the top. Sorry. Actually, there we go.
I do it?
Yeah, no, I got you.
Oh, okay.
All right, so anybody that is in attendance that would like to speak, if you can raise your hand. If not, I'll start adding them one at a time. Mr. Hoffman, okay, we'll add you. All right, so Mr. Hoffman, if you have the ability to add video, you can. I mean, to start your video, you can. We can also hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't hear a thing you said, Brian, because I was not given any of this information about how to connect. And this is my first Zoom meeting. So I don't know. I was just trying this to see because it said that if I didn't have an ID number, I couldn't join. Can you see me as well?
No.
Well, I'm surprised you can hear me then.
You're connected through some online and also through your phone. So go ahead. What are your comments?
I'll just wait if I could and comment later. I'm totally confused because, well, I guess I won't. I'm totally confused at this. I didn't realize this is a project in conjunction with the Five Seasons. I never realized that, and I just thought it was a standalone project.
That's the first I've heard of it as well. The zoning process is a little different. So I was just trying to think of that because the plan that was sent to you is the most recent plan that I've seen as well. The apartments on the 3.5 acre property require a multifamily zoning district. What was shown on the Five Seasons property would not require a zone change. I believe it would be conditional use, the same thing that they've gone through before. You're allowed to have private clubs in single family districts. So that's going to require its own whole separate process from this. If it were to be added into the zoning process, we would have to have another one of these meetings for that property because we didn't send notice to everybody within 200 feet of that property, only the 3.5 acres. So I don't think they need a zone change to do what they're proposing to do. Just by looking at it, it looks like things that are consistent with recreational uses, which are permitted in single family zones with a conditional use. So what we're talking about tonight is just the 3.5 acres because that's what we sent the notices for. So if you have any comments on that project.
Yes, but that's not what he's showing you.
He did show the 3.5 acres and all the development on that property. What he showed was
but it's connected with another property.
right. That would require its own whole process to get that approved. Like I said, it's a whole different commission that would have to go through. It's not a zoning commission case. It would be a board of zoning appeals conditional use hearing. They would have to get that everything that was shown on Five Seasons property, Five Seasons would have to ask for, and they'd have to have their own hearing to discuss it.
Okay, then what is the point of this meeting? Because it's not what was proposed in the letter.
So everything aside from what they showed on the Five Seasons property is substantially the same as what was proposed. It does show a fill area in the area where Mr. Hildebrand said there would be fill. And we're still, I believe, talking about a 4-story, 114 unit building.
Correct.
But
So everything on the 3.5 acres is the same. That's what we're talking. We're talking about the multifamily development on the 3.5 acres.
Okay, DD is a 2.5 story structure, right?
I haven't looked at the actual zoning resolution in relation to this yet, since we haven't had an actual application that's part of the detailed review we go through when we have a zoning change application made. I believe that's great when it's a transition zone, but I'm not sure if this would be considered a transition zone or not. But so that would be something that would need a variance as part of the process if it were to be approved.
Okay, so there would be more meetings, is that what you're saying?
Yes, there would be 3 more meetings after this one, 2 more notified public hearings. There would be notices sent out for a future zoning commission hearing and a future township trustee hearing.
Okay. Thank you. I'll wait to hear from other people.
Okay, thank you. Let's remove. So Mr. Dean, I'm not sure how to take people and put them back into attendees. Still there, Dean?
I just did it. You're good.
Okay, perfect. All right, so you had Mr. Hoffman here for a second who had his hand up next, but then he left.
Oh, sorry. Were you trying to move Hoffman too?
Was he not, was he the one that was just speaking? He was, I'm sorry, I apologize. Was it Goldberg was the next one? I'm not sure. Who do we have in here now? This number that ends in 504 just muted themselves again?
That's who was just talking.
Okay, all right. So, all right, then we'll go to Mr. Goldberg. All right, Mr. Goldberg, if you have any comments, you need to unmute yourself. And if you have the ability to add video, you can.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I had trouble getting in. I'm sorry. I have some questions. I missed the short presentation a few moments ago because I had trouble getting in. But I was at the last presentation, and as I look at this plan, I'm sorry I missed it a few minutes ago, but this looks like it's completely different from what was presented before. This appears to be one building.
So anything that we've had a meeting on before, none of those have proceeded to the zone change process. So this is a completely different plan than any of the others that have been presented at the previous public staff review conferences.
Okay, so I want to try to understand. Is this rental or ownership property?
Yeah, go ahead.
This would be rental.
Okay, and the last one was ownership. So this is one building with 114 rental units.
Yes, sir.
And can someone explain to me what the 1,200, it didn't say feet in the letter, it said 1,200, and then this area to the west, what is that?
Yeah, what we propose there would be a single-story, small little maintenance facility for the property itself, just so we can keep, a brick and stone enclosure, small little maintenance building, so that we can have everything to do maintenance on site. That's what that was for.
Okay. Do we have any idea what are these going to be 1, 2, 3 bedrooms or a combination?
Yeah, so we had a market research study done by Mr. Den that did all of the units, all of the developments for Vintage Club. He also did the project that's going on in Montgomery right now, and he's done the last 5 developments on Wilkins Boulevard and Mason Montgomery Road in Deerfield Township. And his market research study came back and said there's actually 7 different classification of units that will be in this building. The smallest the smallest 1-bedroom flat, as he terminized it, would be 650 square feet, and then it would go up to a 2-bedroom, 2-bath plus a den would be 1,300 square feet. So that's kind of the range from 600 to 1,300 square feet.
And what's the range in rentals that you're anticipating?
So we would start out at $1,075 and go up to $1,950.
Okay, and what other, so those are the only 2 structures, the ones that we've discussed, right?
Yes, sir.
And are there any other amenities there, such as pool or clubhouse or?
Well, and I kind of bombarded Mr. Snyder just because we have been working diligently with 5 Seasons, and we just yesterday came to kind of conceptual terms of how we're going to do it. But if you rent from our complex, you will have a membership to 5 Seasons. So that is our amenity package, and that's why all of the integration between the new boulevard that we would like to build and 5 Seasons, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but their tennis courts are all the way on the back side of their property. You got to go walk over a creek and go up the hillside. So for a long time, they've wanted to move those back on the north side so that their patrons can practice outside. And this development kind of helps bring that whole corridor together. And so we would have 2 pocket parks kind of as we've shown, and then the ability to have the tennis courts outside. But then also if you're a resident of the apartment building, you could go in their facility, you could use their pool, use their whole complex, and it would be part of your rental rate.
Okay, and all the parking is underground?
Majority of the parking, yes, sir, is underground. There is some surface parking. I don't remember exactly how many spots, but there is some surface parking on the southwest side and back of the building, and then there's just a few spots on the front of the building.
And how many levels is the garage going to be?
It's one level, one level.
You're going to have over 100 spaces on one level?
Yeah, I think the plan called for 98.
And the configuration of that parking garage, does that go under the maintenance building as well, or just the apartment building?
It goes underneath the entire apartment building. It does not go underneath the maintenance building.
Okay. I like the last proposal. I'm, withhold on this one, my own feelings. But I like the last proposal you presented. I think I told you that last time, but I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you, Chris and Brian.
All right, thank you. So again, I'm not sure how you add them back to the. Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, so Henry Mangan. We'll add you now. Okay, so Mr. Mangan, if you can unmute yourself and ask any questions you would like to ask.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Mr. Hildebrandt, you just said that there'd be 90 spaces, 98 spaces underneath the building for parking. How many spaces outside the building for a total of what?
I don't have the exact number, and I don't know how to. Brian, should I pull that site plan up again, since maybe everybody didn't get a chance to look at it?
Sure.
Let's see if I do that and share. So can everybody see this again?
Yeah.
So we have, so this is Snyder Road here, north and south. So we're coming in, this is the main boulevard. So we peel off of here, and there's 18 spaces here on the north side of this. There's 23 spaces here. And then there's a total of 33 spaces here on this side, including these. That's 41, that's 54 spaces surface parking, so 54 surface parking spaces. And then everything else is underground.
So it's 172 altogether.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me too. So 172 spaces sufficient to support 114 units.
The zoning resolution requires a number of spaces depending on number of bedrooms. So the parking analysis would have to be submitted with the zone change to prove that they could meet the zoning requirements.
I have another question. Do you know how many feet south of the Trotter's Chase entrance, this entrance, new entrance would be?
I
Feet?
I don't know the exact feet.
Probably a couple hundred feet based on the scale shown at the bottom. If that graphic scale is accurate, I don't know. 120 is the whole scale, so probably a couple hundred feet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I can tell by what I'm looking at here, but so the entrance, the present entrance to Five Seasons would be eliminated. Is that right?
Under this plan, yes. This is the present entrance right here. Do you see this?
I don't mean to cut you off. This plan can't do anything to Five Seasons property. Five Seasons property changes would have to be done by Five Seasons as part of a separate process. So I don't know, Mr. Hildebrand, if you can highlight the property line again.
This is the property line.
Right, so everything south of that is what we're talking about as part of this potential zone change. Everything on the other side of that is up to Five Seasons to have approved.
Okay.
Separately.
So we're talking about 170 vehicles potentially coming in and out of this new entrance, a couple hundred feet south of Trotter's Chase.
Right, and I would assume that this plan would allow for the future possible connection of Five Seasons to that driveway as well. And then there would be a future public hearing to discuss eliminating the Five Seasons current driveway and allowing them to connect to this property. I think that's the way that it would have to be handled.
Would there be a traffic impact study of this additional traffic made prior to the completion of this process?
Yes.
Who would be doing that, and when do you think that would be done?
Well, we wanted to have the meeting and get the comments back first. We would probably start it in a couple weeks. And we will hire a company. Do you want to know the name of the company?
I don't need to know the name. I would like to know that one is going to be done by a reputable licensed firm, and that information would be provided as we go through this process.
Sure. So traffic impact studies can be completed voluntarily by developers, but if required by the Hamilton County engineer who maintains Snyder Road, then the Hamilton County engineer would review the traffic impact study, regardless of whether they require one or one is done voluntarily or privately. Any of the changes that would be recommended by the traffic impact study, like left turn lanes in or right decel lanes in, or road widenings or anything else, would be reviewed and approved by the Hamilton County engineer to make sure that they meet things like sight distance, safe stopping distance, the speed of traffic, speed limit, I'm sorry. And any other changes that would be proposed would have to be reviewed and approved by the Hamilton County engineer.
Okay. Next question has to do with the height of this building. A 4-story building is not a height that I am familiar with anywhere within a 1 mile or even more radius of this area. Are you aware of any other 4-story buildings in this area?
If you're asking me, the best representation of the building would be the new apartment complex that they're building on Mason, in between Mason Montgomery Road and Wilkins Boulevard. I think it's called One Deerfield. It's a 4-story building. If you go down to Red Bank Road, they just built the Red development down there. That's a 4-story apartment building. So I don't know what you're familiar with, but this.
I'm familiar with what you just pointed out. That's well up into Deerfield, then up near, off, up near the shopping centers.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Nothing in a residential area like this that I can see 4 stories high. Is a 4-story apartment building fairly common in Symmes Township? Do we have others that we can point to that we could look at besides what you just mentioned?
I'm not sure. I don't know that answer.
No, I'm not aware of any that I could point you to either.
So this type of residence is a little bit unique for Symmes Township at this point.
It may be. The 4-story buildings aren't that necessarily uncommon along I-71. I know there are a bunch of other ones, including some of the office buildings in Symmes Township. But I can't think of it. I don't believe there's another residential apartment building or condo building in Symmes Township that's 4 stories.
Okay. It just seems like it will stick out to me quite significantly compared to the area it's planned to be put in. I guess this is for you, Brian. You started out the meeting mentioning the 3 steps that we would be going through for this zoning request. And now with the addition of Five Seasons involvement in some way, how would you suggest those steps are going to proceed now? What would happen? What should we look forward to in terms of next steps?
So right now they're 2 separate properties, and these would be 2 separate proposals. Even though they may be linked, from a zoning standpoint, the process that we're discussing tonight, because of the way that we notified for this meeting, only involves the 3.5 acre property, which, as you can see on this graphic, all the things that are shown, with the exception of the fact that the driveway is being connected. If you take everything on Five Seasons property out of this, that's what would be going through those same 3 meetings. The zone change process is laid out by state law. It doesn't change. To do this will require planning commission, zoning commission, and township trustees meetings and township trustee approval. Five Seasons, what they're showing here, like I said, we could start this all over again, have another meeting to change the zoning on their property, but what they're showing there is permitted with Board of Zoning Appeals approval of a conditional use, which is a different process. It's one meeting with the Board of Zoning Appeals. So Five Seasons can do this, just like if they were doing this on the other side of the property, it didn't have anything to do with this development. They can have modifications to their plan considered by the BZA completely separate from this. So for the purpose of tonight's meeting, where we're talking about the apartment building on the 3.5 acres, the way I described the zoning process is the same. It doesn't change.
Okay, but if that's the case, we just talked about a traffic impact study. The traffic impact study for this particular zoning review process then would be
So the traffic impact study does not typically, it doesn't have to and probably shouldn't be tied to the zoning area. It's tied to the traffic volumes anticipated in the at the intersection and on the road. So they can complete a traffic impact study to get ultimate approval from the county engineer for the Five Seasons traffic coming through there as well, which I would assume that they would do, so they wouldn't have to do 2 different traffic studies. The traffic study, as far as zoning goes, is just meant to indicate whether or not the driveway is safe. All of the improvements to the road would only happen if zoning was approved and a building permit was issued to start building this building. Then the county engineer would be involved in making sure that before the building opened, all the roadway improvements that were required to provide a safe access would have to be done before people could start living in the building. But they're not going to do that or spend any of that time or do any of those reviews or spend any of that money until the zoning process is done, because if the zoning is ultimately denied, they would have wasted all their time and effort doing all of that review. So the county engineer won't get involved until after the zoning is done. And the traffic impact study can include any traffic that's anticipated to use the driveway. It's not limited to the zone change area.
Okay, well, to a layman, the proposal, even if you keep Five Seasons out of it, there already is a 4-way intersection there, between Trotter's Chase, Five Seasons, and Snyder Road. This proposal is adding another entrance to Snyder Road, and effectively, I guess you're going to be making this decision as if there's now 2 entrances coming onto Snyder Road from that side, as well as Trotter's Chase on the other side. But yet you say we can't think of it that way because that's not going to be the way it'll be. I'm getting confused as to how do we share our thoughts about what we think the impact of all of this is going to be if we can't see it in total.
Well, so there's nothing that says you can't comment on the entire proposal, but the things that are being shown on Five Seasons property can't be approved through this process and aren't even approved by the same board. They're not approved by the trustees. They're approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals, completely separate boards through different processes. Like I said, unless the developer and Five Seasons pull this back and come up with a larger zone change request where everything can be considered together, but doing it this way, the way that we're doing it tonight with this meeting on the 3.5 acres and the proposal for changes to Five Seasons being separate, it's going to be 2 separate processes decided by 2 separate boards. So if the zoning goes first and the Five Seasons hasn't had their approval, when the zoning is moving forward, the zoning board and the township trustees will have to consider that this plan may end up standing alone and creating a different driveway where there will still be a driveway for Five Seasons opposite Trotter's Chase, because they can't control if the Board of Zoning Appeals is going to approve the changes to Five Seasons.
That's exactly my thinking. I can't understand how that happens. So I wonder how you get to the point where the trustees of Symmes Township make a decision on this without having a full understanding of what the end result will be.
Well, so the decision will be whether or not, if this was 3.5 acres and nothing was changing with 5 seasons, that's the same staff review conference that we've had in the past, the same proposals that we've had for just considering it's 3.5 acres with its own driveway. That's what the trustees would be deciding, whether or not that's appropriate. And at some point in the future, 5 seasons can do, their changes through the Board of Zoning Appeals. That's not any different than a typical process. I mean, 5 seasons could have waited 5 years to decide that they wanted to try and connect to this development and enter into this deal with the apartment owners, and that would have been considered at that time. And right now, without the 5 seasons having signed anything or being part of this process, there's nothing to say that they'll actually go through with this. So it'll have to be considered that it may end up standing alone.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure I have any more questions at this point. I have an awful lot of concern. My 2 issues are obviously traffic, but then secondly, the size of this building and the number of apartments in such a small space seems to me to be out of character completely with the neighborhood and would be adding significant volume to the road there in terms of turning in and out on Snyder Road. So that's all my comments.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so let's see. Go back to, okay, so we have Mr. Hafner. So Donald Hafner, if you can unmute yourself and ask any questions or make any comments.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Don Hafner, and I'm concerned about the rezoning of this parcel from A to DD for a number of reasons. First, I don't believe there are any multifamily homes in Symmes Township north of I-71. And I sort of feel it ought to be left that way. And yes, you might take a look at the 5 Seasons Club, but you know what? It's a lot like a country club. It's well landscaped, it's set back, and there are lots of country clubs within very high scale residential areas like Indian Hill, Camargo, Hyde Park, and so forth. So I don't think we should let the fact that the 5 Seasons Club there should have any decision on the rezoning. Also, there might be people that might say that that area is really close to I-71 for single family homes. But you know what? You go on the south side of I-71 and there's a nice subdivision in there with very, very nice homes. And a lot of those homes are real close to I-71. So I don't think that's really an issue either. The other thing is I'm not going to dwell on any further is what Henry's concern is about the traffic issues, but also on the proposal that's presented, if you take a look at the requirements for DD multifamily homes, if you take a look at the requirement based upon 4,356 square feet per apartment, would only allow 35 units versus 117, which I think is way out of proportion. Also, the requirements in DD is either the maximum height is either, can you hear me?
Yes.
The maximum height is either 2.5 stories or potentially 2 stories if it's in a transitional area. So I guess my comment is in here, we ought to leave it as a single family area, and not introduce a DD area in the middle of a real nice single family home area. So those are my comments.
Okay, is that all the comments, or you have any other questions or comments to make?
That's all my comments.
Right. All right. Is there anybody else that has not had a chance to speak that would like to speak? Or any other comments from anybody that has spoken? I'm not sure who the 504 number is again.
That's me, Michael Hoffman.
Awesome. Okay. Gotcha.
I mean, I wanted to jump in because nobody else seems to want to speak, but I think Mr. Goldberg in the beginning, he's still thinking of this original drawing that was sent out with the letter because he was mentioning about a maintenance building, which is on that, but there's no maintenance building shown on this most recent design that I can see. Maybe Mr. Hillenbrand can point out where the separate maintenance building is.
Yeah, to that point, I'm not 100% certain that we're going to have that maintenance building since we have the underground parking garage and there's going to be extra storage under there. So right now that maintenance building is kind of off the table since we were able to get all the underground parking with the extra storage that we needed. That letter was sent to Mr. Snyder 3-4 weeks ago. That was kind of the plan, but at this point, it's not required.
Okay, so personally, Mr. Hillenbrand, I think that this, what you're doing is simply a bait and switch. And I don't understand that why Corporex, which is a big company that owns 5 Seasons, if they were so interested in developing this and getting something from it other than potentially some other club members, then they would spend $178,000 and buy the property themselves. They're a much bigger company than you. But in the meantime, you've gone ahead and cleared the property and you're using it as a storage facility for a construction trailer and a boat. And I just wonder, if I wanted to park an RV on there, how much would you charge me per month?
Well, that's not really the point of the meeting. Mr. Hillenbrand, if you are storing a boat on the property, you should probably get rid of that before a zoning inspector sees it. But so those are potential zoning violation issues with the current property. Construction vehicles are allowed on properties where there's an active construction permit, but there's not one on this property. So anyway, we'll talk about that later. As far as the actual proposed development, is there anything else, Mr. Hoffman?
No.
Okay. All right, and then Mr. Goldberg has another comment, I believe it looks like. Before that, I'm not sure if, let's see. Let me see if Mr. Merrill has any comments. I don't know if I'm not sure anybody knows how to raise their hand. So, Mr. Merrill, if you have any comments, if you could unmute yourself and just tell us if you have any comments or not, that would be helpful.
Okay, sorry. I'm the architect working with Chris. So I was trying to answer a couple of questions that were distances and things of that nature. So I couldn't really quite jump into the conversation there. So I didn't really have any questions. I was trying to answer one.
Okay. Do you have anything you need to say, or I'll just go ahead and back to the list of people in the attendance?
Yeah. So the connection from Trotter's Chase to ours, it's about 225 feet, maybe a little more. So that was one of the questions, right?
Right. Okay. All right. Let's see. Then we'll go to Mr. Goldberg, who raised his hand again. All right. Mr. Goldberg, do you have a comment?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Thank you. I agree with much of what Mr. Mangan had to say earlier. In thinking about this, as I said, I thought the first proposal that came before us was very compatible and not inconsistent with the surrounding area and neighborhoods. This seems to be inconsistent. It's very intense. 114 or 117 apartments is a large building. The size of the building is out of character. The amount of units is out of character. The height of it is very out of character, apparently. And it's really not, you can't compare Mesa Montgomery Road in Deerfield Township, which is heavily commercial over there, with this area here, and the radius of a mile or two around here, a couple of miles. So I think this plan is way too intense, in my own opinion. I think it could be doable if it were scaled down quite a bit. 4 stories is too high. The number of units is too many. I see all the outdoor parking is pretty intense. And that's my concerns. I agree again with a lot of what Mr. Mangan says, and I just wanted to be sure I stated my own feelings at this point.
Okay, good. I got yours and Mr. Mangan's comments on my notes.
Thank you.
Which will become part of our eventual staff report that we present to the Planning, Zoning, and Board of Trustees. All right. Let's see, Mr. Mangan, you have another comment?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I guess my comment, Brian, Henry Mangan again, is that if we are to separate these two decision processes relative to this parcel zoning and what eventually could happen with 5 Seasons, it doesn't seem to me appropriate that the developer can, at this hearing and in the subsequent 3 hearings that you mentioned are going to be coming up with the planning conference and the Symmes Township Board, how is he allowed to present something that might happen in the future connected with 5 Seasons? Why isn't he restricted to present the 3-acre parcel and the building that he wants to put on it without that connection?
So you're allowed to, well, first of all, obviously, I would be presenting the same findings that I just told everybody else, that the 5 Seasons property could be separate. I'm sorry, would have to be decided separately by a different board. I would let everybody know who's in a decision-making role that they would have to consider the possibility that this wouldn't be connected to that project unless it was approved sometime before that. But there is no reason to not plan for potential future connections. In fact, we do encourage the connection of properties when they're adjacent and have compatible uses. Generally, as a rule of planning and zoning, connections that keep people or that allow people to go between compatible developments like this without having to go back out onto Snyder Road is something that we would recommend. If everybody that came from the apartments, if they were approved, had to drive out on Snyder Road just to get back into 5 Seasons, then you'd add a lot of traffic to Snyder Road that would be eliminated by the connection. So it's not unusual for you to plan for potential adjacent improvements that could potentially work with your development, just with the understanding that if they never get approved on the adjacent property, then everybody who's making a decision needs to understand that this could be a standalone project in the future.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. This next meeting, which is the Hamilton County Planning Conference, you said that's public, but it's not a public hearing. Is that what I heard?
That's correct. Yes. The meeting will be held. It's always held on the first Thursday of the month at 1:00 p.m. And right now they're meeting on Zoom. It is a public meeting, and they generally take comments from anybody that attends the meeting related to any case on their agenda. But because it's not a public hearing, there's no notice that's required. So the Planning Commission does not send out notices for zone change cases.
So how would one take the initiative to get to view it publicly?
Well, you can call me or the township. You can check the Hamilton County Planning Commission's webpage. Their packets of information and agendas are updated a week before the meeting, so the last Thursday of every month. Their next month's meeting agenda and a list of reports is on their website.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So is there anybody else that has any other comments before we wrap this meeting up? Okay. So again, Dean from ICRC, I honestly, I can't figure out, I hit more. I don't know what I'm supposed to hit because I've only got remove or put on hold or hide non-video participants. And I'm not sure which one of those puts people back as attendees, but Mr. Hoffman is asking to say something else. So Mr. Hoffman, you're a panelist now, you can speak.
Anybody? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Is there anybody on this Zoom call representing Five Seasons or Corporex that owns Five Seasons? And I would, if there is, I would like to hear from them as to why, other than just getting some extra members, they approve of this project.
There's nobody from Five Seasons on this call.
That's interesting.
This meeting isn't about Five Seasons. It's about the 3.5 acres.
Well, the drawing showed it's connecting with Five Seasons. Mr. Hillenbrand said that if you're a resident of the apartment, you would be able to use their facilities. So I think it's connected.
Well, that's a proposal that hasn't been approved. And again, because of the zoning of the Five Seasons property and the way that works, this process likely won't include that consideration. So what we have right now is a proposal for a possible future connection between these two, both from them offering passes and by connecting physically the driveways. But what we're actually considering is whether or not, or if you have any comments or concerns before a zoning process starts for just the 3.5 acres with the 114 units. Five Seasons whole part of this would have to be considered separately at this point.
Okay. Well, all along since 2005, my thinking of it was and I did a study and marked off the property and so forth and saw that the stopping distance from a car coming over the overpass, and it wasn't approved back in 2005. And of course, I was at the meeting in May, and it was the same situation. So that's my consideration, is the concern over the dangerous traffic pattern caused by other cars coming in and out of that proposed property.
And so that would be the point of the traffic impact study and the Hamilton County engineers review. So the Hamilton County engineer's job is when you propose a new driveway onto one of their county roads, their job is to make sure that you have sight distance and that you have the adequate turning lanes if required based on the traffic study, and that if they are going to require those improvements, the developer will have to install those at his expense prior to being able to move people into the building.
Well, after the last meeting in May, I saw some surveyors, and I stopped and talked to them, and they were doing a sightline study regarding that property. Was there any result to that study that you know of?
I can comment to that. We actually had the Hamilton County engineer come out and approve the sightline distance in a specific location where we can, separate than Five Seasons, we can have our own direct access. So we did get that approved.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else from anybody else? Okay, so as I stated, if this zone process continues, you can contact the township, you can contact me, you can check the Hamilton County Planning and Development website for updates on the Regional Planning Commission meeting. However, the two public hearings, the Zoning Commission and the Township Trustees, if you got notice for tonight's meeting, you'll get notice for those public hearings as well. You can always reach out again to the Township or to me or my staff with any questions or comments that you may have in the future. I appreciate everybody's participation in the Zoom staff review conference, first one that I've ever participated in for one of these kind of meetings, and I've done a bunch. So hopefully everybody got what they needed to get and had their comments heard, and I appreciate everybody's patience. We'll go ahead and end the meeting at this point unless anybody has any final comments.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, Dean from ICRC, I believe we